I found this strange mechanical instrument stored in a wooden case. The section on top appears to be a handle, suggesting the device may have been held up while in use. There was also a separate box nearby containing a sextant, which made me wonder if this might be a nautical instrument or some type of calibrating device. What you found is most likely a World War II-era United States Navy fist-type telescopic stadimeter, probably manufactured by Schick Incorporated in Stamford, Connecticut, around 1942 or 1943. This instrument was a handheld optical rangefinder used to estimate the distance to a ship or other object when its actual height was already known. The dark central section served as a handle, allowing the observer to hold the instrument up while looking through its telescope. The operating principle was based on simple geometry. A naval observer first needed to know the height of the target, usually the distance from a ship's waterline to a specific point near the top of its mast. The observer entered that known height into the stadimeter by turning the long screw mechanism. He then looked through the telescope at the target. The optical system created two views of the same ship. One image was seen directly, while the other reached the eye after being reflected through a pair of mirrors. By turning the micrometer control, the observer moved the reflected image up or down until the reflected masthead appeared to touch the directly viewed waterline. Once the 2 points were aligned, the instrument had effectively measured the small angle formed by the known height of the ship. The calibrated drum then converted that angular measurement into distance, allowing the observer to read the range directly in yards. I found this small, round metal object marked Thomas A. Edison, Inc. It also has a small raised metal piece in the center. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a vented filler cap from an Edison nickel-iron alkaline storage battery. It was mounted in the center of the top of an Edison battery cell, between the positive and negative terminals. The cap served two important purposes. It covered the opening used to fill and maintain the battery, and it allowed gases produced during charging to escape safely. Edison began working seriously on this battery in the late 1890s. One of his main goals was to develop a better battery for electric automobiles. Lead-acid batteries were heavy, and Edison wanted something more durable, resistant to corrosion, and capable of withstanding rough treatment for many years. The first commercial version was introduced around 1903, although serious problems quickly emerged. Customers reported leaking cells and loss of capacity. Soon afterward, Edison shut down production of the defective batteries and spent several years redesigning the electrodes, containers, seals, and other components. The improved Type A Edison battery entered commercial production in July of 1909. The redesign quickly proved successful. In 1910, the Edison Storage Battery Company sold more than $1 million worth of batteries, and by June of 1913, the West Orange factory was producing about 1,000 cells a day. I found this unusual component from an old computer. It has dozens of small metal pins around the edges and an intricate grid of extremely fine wires in the center. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a magnetic core memory plane, an early form of computer random access memory that stored information in hundreds of tiny ferrite rings. This type of memory was widely used in computers from the 1950s through the early 1970s, before silicon memory largely replaced it. The tiny dark rings woven into the center are the actual memory cells. Each ring, called a magnetic core, could store one binary bit, either a 0 or a 1. Instead of using electrical charge inside a transistor, the computer stored each bit by magnetizing the ferrite ring in one of two opposite directions. This memory plane contains two neighboring square matrices, each with roughly 16 by 16 cores. If there are about 512 storage cores in total, and each one represents a single bit, the entire visible plane would hold only about 64 modern 8-bit bytes. For comparison, 1 second of the video you're watching right now takes up about 7 million bytes. So, to store just 1 second of this video, you'd need roughly 109,000 of these memory planes. My friends, I'd love to tell you more about this type of memory and how it works. Unfortunately, that would go beyond the format of this video. Let me know in the comments if you'd be interested in a separate video about this type of memory. I found this object in the basement of a house I recently bought. It has a metal housing with several stacked fins and a small pink ceramic piece on top. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a magnetron from a microwave oven. More precisely, it is a cavity magnetron, a high-power vacuum tube that generates the microwave energy used to heat food. The metal piece protruding from the top is the magnetron's output antenna. The pink section beneath it is a ceramic insulator, while the stack of thin metal plates surrounding the body serves as the cooling fins. The magnetron produces electromagnetic waves that travel through the waveguide into the cooking chamber. Some of that energy is absorbed by the food and converted into heat. I found this unusual red metal device on an electrical contractor's lot. It has a cylindrical housing, several thick metal coils on one side, and a flat mounting plate at the bottom. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is most likely a Burners Incorporated FL Series straight-fire liquid propane burner. It is a high-output industrial burner designed to operate on liquid propane. The large coil at the front is actually part of the fuel system. The coil is made from hollow steel tubing and acts as an onboard propane vaporizer. Liquid propane enters the coil and is heated by the burner's own flame. As it travels through the hot tubing, the propane changes from a liquid into a vapor. The vapor is then fed into the burner, mixed with air, and burned to produce a large, continuous flame. I found this unusual object while cleaning out my parents' old car. It has a black rubber pouch that looks somewhat like a balloon and an orange plastic opening with a removable cap. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is most likely an original-style pocket shot, a compact circular slingshot. To use it, a projectile is placed inside the black latex pouch. The user grips the orange ring with one hand, pulls the closed end of the pouch backward with the other, aims through the circular opening, and releases it. This unusual design was developed by American inventor Sean Phillips. According to the United States patent, the design has a priority date of December 12, 2012. Although, when we were kids, we made similar ones using the neck of a plastic bottle and a balloon. I noticed this small, circular fixture built into the outside wall of my building, right next to an exit door. It is about 3/4 of an inch in diameter and has a keyhole in the center. There is also a gray utility box directly below it. Does anyone know what this is? What you found is most likely a Dutch fire brigade key tube, known in the Netherlands as a sleutelbuis or brandweer sleutelbuis. It is essentially a small emergency key safe built directly into the exterior wall of a building, allowing firefighters to gain access without having to force open a door. A building key, gate key, access badge, or similar credential is stored inside the tube. The system was designed around a controlled master key. Rather than carrying a different key for every building in their area, firefighters could carry one authorized key capable of opening these emergency key tubes. The concept is not unique to the Netherlands. In the United States, the closest equivalent is a fire department rapid access key box. Many Americans know this type of system by the brand name Knoxbox, although Knox is a specific commercial brand rather than a generic term. My grandmother left me this unusual wooden-handled object with several removable tools stored inside. One of the attachments appears to hold pencil lead, and I suspect some pieces may be missing. Does anyone know what this set was used for? What you found is most likely a portable writing set, also known as a writing etui. Based on surviving examples, this type of set likely dates from around 1890 to 1915. The three surviving tools appear to be a dip pen holder, a pencil or lead holder, and a small writing knife or ink erasing knife. My mom bought this unusual wooden board for $1 because she thought I might be interested in it. It has several curved measurement scales and 2 long adjustable metal arms. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a Coutinho Sacadura course corrector, a mechanical aviation navigation calculator developed by Portuguese naval officers Gago Coutinho and Sacadura Cabral in the early 1920s. It was designed to help a navigator determine wind direction and speed, calculate how much the aircraft was drifting off course, and find the heading needed to stay on the intended route. To use the course corrector, the crew first had to determine how much the airplane was drifting while flying on a known heading. Over the open ocean, where there were no roads or landmarks to follow, Coutinho and Cabral used floating smoke-producing markers on the water. By looking back at the apparent direction of those markers, they could compare the airplane's heading with its actual path over the sea. I found this unusual wooden box with a game board on top and several small animal-shaped pieces that look like goats. Does anyone know what this game is or how it is played? What you found is most likely a Bog Chow set, a traditional Nepalese strategy game commonly known in English as tigers and goats. The game is played by two people, with one player controlling 4 tigers and the other controlling 20 goats. At the beginning of the game, the 4 tigers are placed in the 4 corners of the board. The goat player starts with all 20 goats off the board and adds them one at a time to empty intersections. During this first phase, the goats already on the board normally remain in place until all 20 have been introduced. The tigers can move from the beginning. A tiger normally moves 1 step along one of the marked lines to an adjacent empty intersection. To capture a goat, the tiger jumps over it into an empty position immediately beyond it, somewhat like capturing a piece in checkers. Once all 20 goats have been placed, the goats are allowed to move as well. They can move 1 step along the marked lines, although they still cannot capture the tigers. Instead, the goat player tries to gradually block the tiger's possible routes until they can no longer move. Under the commonly used modern rules, the tigers win if they capture 5 goats. The goats win if they manage to immobilize all 4 tigers. My grandmother received this unusual object as a white elephant gift. It stands about 10 inches tall, has several visible gears and mechanical parts inside a glass dome, but none of them seem to move. There are no markings or stamps anywhere on it. What you found is most likely a vintage table cigarette lighter made to resemble an old Wall Street stock ticker. Collectors commonly refer to this design as an Edison stock market ticker tape table lighter. The real machine that inspired the lighter was an important piece of early financial technology. Before electronic market displays and computer networks, stock prices had to be transmitted from exchanges to brokerage offices. Stock tickers allowed updated prices to be sent electrically and automatically printed onto a narrow strip of paper known as ticker tape. One of the key figures in the development of this technology was Edward A. Callahan. In 1867, he developed an electrical system for transmitting financial quotations, and in 1868, he received a United States patent for a telegraphic indicator designed specifically to communicate the prices of stocks, gold, and other securities. I found this unusual wall-mounted device with 2 long wooden pieces, a spring between them, and a metal cylinder. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is an antique hand corn planter. It allowed a farmer to make a planting hole and drop a measured amount of seed into it while remaining upright. Tools of this general type were widely used on American farms from the 19th century through the early 20th century. At each planting spot, the farmer pushed the pointed lower end of the tool into the soil. Moving the 2 wooden handles operated the mechanism near the bottom. Depending on the exact design, pointed metal blades or plates opened slightly beneath the surface to create a small planting hole. At the same time, a sliding or rotating pocket beneath the hopper collected a limited number of kernels and carried them over an opening. Gravity then allowed the kernels to fall through an internal passage and into the hole in the ground. I found this unusual 2-piece metal object. The 2 halves lock together to form an egg-shaped container, and one section has a small internal mechanism. Does anyone know what it is or what it was used for? What you found is a vintage ENIGMATIC Topo stove potato baker, a small portable stovetop oven designed by American inventor Raymond L. Barton and manufactured by ENIGMATIC Products Corporation in Los Angeles during the mid-1930s. The 2 metal sections locked together to form the distinctive egg-shaped body. To use it, a washed potato was pierced with the long internal skewer, which held it near the center of the chamber. The 2 halves were then closed and secured with the wire loop. As the aluminum shell heated, hot air and moisture released from the potato circulated inside the enclosed chamber. I found several of these unusual wheeled devices around a convention center. Each one has a metal box and a tall pole with a cylindrical device mounted at the top. Does anyone know what they are? What you found is most likely a portable sampling unit, a rugged outdoor air sampling system designed to continuously collect particles from the surrounding air. Inside the metal cabinet is a vacuum pump that continuously draws outside air through the sampling head and across a removable filter. Airborne particles become trapped on the filter while the air continues through the system. After a predetermined sampling period, A technician unlocks the unit, removes the filter, installs a fresh one, and sends the collected sample to a laboratory for analysis. Depending on how the equipment is being used, the filter can be examined for ordinary dust, asbestos fibers, radioactive particles, or biological material. I saw this game table in a park in Beijing today. There were tables for Mahjong and Go nearby, but I didn't recognize this one. Does anyone know what game it's for? What you saw is an outdoor track-style xiangqi table. Xiangqi is a traditional Chinese strategy game commonly known in English as Chinese chess. More specifically, this appears to be a good family outdoor installation, designed for permanent use in parks and other public spaces. Each round piece is permanently secured inside a network of narrow tracks built into the tabletop. Instead of picking up a piece and placing it somewhere else, players slide it through the channels to the appropriate position. I saw this large tower in Skjern, a town on the west coast of Denmark. At first, it looked like some kind of utility tower, but I've never seen one with a huge circular structure like this. What you saw is a giant community television and radio receiving antenna in Skjern, Denmark. The installation was built by the Danish company Coils and consists of a lattice tower about 259 feet tall with an enormous parabolic reflector almost 79 feet in diameter. Its original purpose was to receive weak terrestrial television and radio broadcasts from neighboring countries, especially Germany and Norway, and distribute them through Skjern's shared community antenna network. Incoming radio waves from a distant transmitter strike the curved metal grid and are reflected toward a focal area where receiving antenna elements collect the concentrated signal. The larger the reflector, the more energy it can collect from a weak signal, and the better it can favor signals arriving from a particular direction. What are these two metal objects on the right? They feel like they might be made of steel or lead, and I haven't been able to find anything else like them. Does anyone know what they are? What you found is most likely a pair of early pattern Lazy Dog kinetic flechettes, or possibly replicas made to resemble them. These were small, fin-stabilized metal projectiles designed to be dropped from aircraft and strike targets using kinetic energy alone. They contain no explosive charge or fuse. The heavy, pointed body concentrated the force of impact into a very small area, while the broad fins at the rear stabilized the projectile as it fell. Lazy Dogs were normally released in large numbers from aircraft. When dropped from a fast-moving aircraft at low altitude, they initially retained some of the aircraft's forward speed, increasing the amount of energy they carried when they reached the ground. I noticed this flashing green light mounted high above a building in Portland, Oregon. Does anyone know what it is or what it is used for? What you saw is the Standard Weather Beacon, a rooftop weather forecast light mounted on Standard Plaza in downtown Portland, Oregon. It has been a Portland landmark for decades, using different colors and flashing patterns to provide a simple forecast that people can read just by looking at the skyline. The color indicates how the temperature is expected to change. Green means the temperature is expected to remain within about 5 degrees of its current level. Red means it is expected to become more than about 5 degrees warmer, while white means it is expected to become more than about 5 degrees colder. The beacon also indicates precipitation. A steady light means no precipitation is expected, while a flashing light means rain or other precipitation is expected. I found this unusual hollow bronze figure that appears to depict some kind of monkey warrior or deity. It stands about 8.5 inches tall, measures roughly 5.5 inches across the shoulders, and weighs almost 3 pounds. When lightly tapped in different areas, it produces ringing tones. What you found is most likely a folk-style statue of Ganesha, the elephant-headed Hindu deity, probably made in the Dokra, lost wax metal casting tradition of eastern or central India. Ganesha is one of the best-known deities in Hinduism. He is traditionally described as the son of Shiva and Parvati, and is especially associated with removing obstacles, protecting worshippers, and bringing good fortune at the beginning of a new undertaking. I came across this photograph on the 2018 World Photography Awards website. It shows a person in a small boat surrounded by these enormous sail-like structures stretching over the water. These are traditional tidal fishing nets from Xiapu County in Fujian, China. Locally, they are known as piao wang, meaning floating or flying nets, and more specifically, as dingziwang. Each net has a relatively wide opening facing the tidal current and gradually narrows toward a small, closed pocket at the other end. As the tide moves through the net, small fish, shrimp, and other aquatic animals are carried through the opening and farther into the narrowing bag. Once the catch reaches the narrow end, it can no longer escape. When the water level falls, the fisherman approaches the net in a small boat, raises the netting, opens the tide lower section, and removes the catch. The nets are supported by bamboo or wooden poles driven into the tidal flats or riverbed. Unlike a trawl, the entire net does not have to be dragged through the water by a boat. The poles keep the opening in position, while the tidal current does most of the work. I found this unusual device while interning at a historical society. My boss couldn't identify it and joked he'd give me $1 if I figured it out. Does anyone know what this item is and what it was used for? What you found is an antique polarimeter, a scientific instrument, once used to measure the optical rotation of liquid samples. In simple terms, it shines polarized light through a solution and measures how much that light is rotated as it passes through. This rotation reveals important information about the sample's composition or concentration. Polarimeters were most commonly used to analyze sugar content in liquids, which is why they were sometimes called saccharimeters. The instrument dates to the late 19th or early 20th century and was likely used in a chemistry lab, a sugar refinery, or even a customs office. It works with 2 polarizing lenses, a light source, and a long sample tube. The user would rotate the viewing lens until the field of view appeared uniform, then read the angle of rotation from a circular scale. From that measurement, they could determine the purity or concentration of substances such as sugar or essential oils. I found this oversized baseball card in a box of late 1980s era baseball cards, and it has a vinyl-like plastic portion attached to it. This card is larger than the rest, about the size of 2 cards placed side by side. What you have is a talking baseball card from the Topps Baseball Talk Cards series from 1989. The vinyl-like plastic portion is a thin, flexible phonograph record. When that disc is played, it gives you about 2 to 3 minutes of sound, usually a short interview, a narrated highlight, or a classic moment connected to the player on the card. Topps made these cards bigger than standard trading cards and partnered with LJN to sell a handheld sports talk player that works like a tiny battery-powered record player.
Hello there, everybody. This is Mel Allen with Baseball Talk.
This idea has a much longer history than most people realize. Inventors were already experimenting with talking postcards in the early 1900s, and a United States patent from 1919 described a postcard designed to carry a recordable groove, so a voice message could be mailed and played back later. Baseball used the concept early, too, including cereal and store promotions in the 1950s, and then the AuraVision picture record cards in the early 1960s, which laminated a clear record over a player photo and included interviews with major league stars. Topps brought it back at full scale in 1989 with a set of 164 cards. The concept was memorable, and it struggled in the market because the sports talk player could be finicky and the price was high compared with normal card packs. So many sets ended up in clearance bins. I found this unusual metal tool on a farm in St. Charles, Missouri. It has a pointed spike with 3 blade-like fins and a twist knob at the back. Does anyone know what it was used for? What you found is a vintage pipe reamer, a specialized tool used to smooth and widen the interior of cut metal pipes. Its main purpose was to remove burrs and sharp edges left after cutting, creating a clean and even opening so fittings could seat properly or threads could be cut without obstruction. Pipe reamers like this were essential tools for plumbers, steam fitters, and farm workers throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries. This style, with a long handle and a fixed conical cutting head, was commonly used on iron or steel piping found in plumbing systems, irrigation lines, and mechanical equipment. The basic design dates back to patents from the 1890s through the 1930s, when companies such as Muller and Reed Manufacturing refined ratcheting reamers to make the job faster and less physically demanding. I found this unusual tool in a box of my dad's old tools. It has 3 adjustable pins at the top and a thumb wheel that moves the 2 sidearms in and out. We have no idea what it's for. Does anyone recognize this tool? What you've found is a watch case back opener, a specialized tool used to open the rear covers of wristwatches. The adjustable pins are designed to grip the notches on the back of a watch, allowing the user to twist and remove it without causing damage to the case. This particular style is commonly referred to as a 3-pin or JAXA-style opener. These tools became widespread in the early 20th century, when wristwatches with sealed backs replaced simpler pocket watch designs. As waterproof and dustproof watches became more common, watchmakers needed a reliable way to open the backs for battery changes, repairs, or adjustments. Earlier versions were knife-like tools used for snap-on cases, but by the 1960s, universal openers with adjustable arms like this one became essential in repair shops and toolkits. I found this strange object buried near a power line tower while out in the wilderness. It looks like some kind of heavy ceramic bell with a cracked interior, and it's hinged in the middle. Does anyone know what it is? This is an antique brass mortar and pestle from India, dating to the mid to late 19th century. Mortars of this type were commonly found in Indian households and small apothecaries during the 19th century, especially in rural areas, where durable brass utensils were preferred for their strength and long service life. Brass was valued because it could withstand repeated impact without cracking and did not easily react with food or herbal preparations. I found this strange mechanical device in Cumberland Gap, Tennessee. It has a large gear with what looks like a counterweight, but it doesn't spin all the way around. Does anyone know what it was used for? What you found is a miniature pump jack, a scaled-down version of the classic nodding donkey oil well pump. Designed to draw water or oil from a shallow well, it uses the same mechanical principle as full-size pump jacks, with a counterweighted crank that rotates to rock a horizontal beam up and down, driving a rod into the ground to lift fluid to the surface. This type of pump jack became common in the United States in the early 20th century, especially after Walter Trout patented the modern balance design in 1926. Full-size models were built to extract oil in fields across Texas, Oklahoma, and California, while smaller versions were also used in rural areas to pump groundwater, particularly in places without access to electricity. I've had this piece of furniture in my parents' home my whole life. Now it's mine, and none of us knows what it does. My mom thinks it may have come from her father's family in the Kentuckiana region, and she also associates it with the Pennsylvania Dutch. Does anyone know what it is? What you have is a Victorian tatting stand, a specialized piece of sewing furniture used in the late 19th century for the craft of tatting, a method of making lace with fine threads and a shuttle. These stands were designed to keep threads organized, spools accessible, and tools like pins and needles within easy reach. The top of the stand typically features a velvet pin cushion, and around the sides are numbered pegs or spindles for holding spools of thread. The numbers and letters engraved or attached to the sides were used to organize threads by size or material. It likely dates to the 1870s or 1880s, during the height of tatting's popularity in England and the United States. Many stands were built as folk art or crafted in small batches, often by hand, which is why each one has slightly different details. I found this small object marked sterling and made by Rogers and Hamilton Silver. It's about 4 inches long and looks like it might be from the 1890s. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a sterling silver glove darner, a small household tool used in the 19th and early 20th centuries to repair worn or torn fingers in gloves. The darner's rounded ends were inserted into a glove's finger or thumb, providing a firm surface beneath the hole so it could be neatly sewn closed. One end was usually smaller for slender glove fingers, while the other was slightly larger for thumbs or wider areas. Sterling silver examples like this one were commonly included in ladies' sewing kits and were sometimes given as gifts. I found this heavy metal device in my friend's basement. It was already there when they moved in, and no one knows what it does. The house is over 100 years old, and this item probably is too. It looks like it might have been some kind of roaster, but we're not sure. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a Hobart electric combination coffee mill and meat grinder, likely dating back to the 1910s or 1920s. This heavy-duty appliance was built by the Hobart Manufacturing Company of Troy, Ohio, and was designed for commercial use in general stores, butcher shops, hotels, and institutional kitchens. The coffee mill used a burr grinding mechanism with an adjustable fineness setting. while the meat grinder featured a feed screw, rotating blade, and cutting plate capable of producing about 3 pounds of ground meat per minute. Some units were also used for sausage stuffing with additional attachments. I found this unusual metal object in a barn in Indiana. It's conical in shape, with a series of small holes arranged in rows around the sides. Each row is labeled with numbers. The spacing between the numbers gets smaller the higher the row goes, which makes it hard to figure out what kind of scale or measurement it uses. What you found is a World War I French artillery fuse, specifically a time and percussion fuse, often nicknamed the beehive because of its stepped, conical shape. This component originally screwed into the nose of an artillery shell and controlled when the shell exploded. The numbered rows on the outside are part of the timing scale. They are not evenly spaced because they correspond to the burn rate of an internal powder time train rather than a linear measurement. In combat, artillery crews set this fuse so the shell would detonate either in midair after a selected number of seconds or instantly on impact if it struck the ground or an object first. After the war, many of these fuses were removed from spent or inert shells and brought home by soldiers as souvenirs. Because they were made of brass and had a striking shape, they were frequently polished and repurposed into trench art objects such as paperweights, candle holders, or desk ornaments. I've seen these bent, slotted, triangle-shaped devices hanging from power lines along highways in the Southwest. They show up pretty regularly, but I've never been able to figure out what they're for. Does anyone know what their purpose is? What you've seen is an anti-galloping wind damper, a special device installed on high-voltage power lines to control dangerous line movement caused by wind. In strong winds, power lines can begin to gallop, a violent type of oscillation where the wires bounce up and down in large waves. This typically occurs when wind or ice gives the cable an uneven shape, creating lift like an airplane wing. These triangular metal dampers function as aerodynamic spoilers. By disrupting airflow and adding weight, they help prevent the line from building up hazardous motion. The design dates back to the 1960s, when engineer Albert Richardson patented the original wind damper after successful wind tunnel tests at MIT. Since then, these devices have been widely used across the United States, particularly in regions prone to strong winds or ice accumulation. I found this large concrete bowl about 3 meters wide, sitting on a hill near Vendée in the south of France. There's another one about 20 meters away. It has steel plates around the rim that look like they were meant to hold something in place. Does anyone know what this was used for? What you've found is the remains of a French World War I anti-aircraft gun platform, originally designed to support the iconic 75mm 75 field gun. These platforms were developed during the First World War, when airplanes began posing a serious threat on the battlefield. Instead of designing entirely new weapons, the French military adapted their reliable 75mm field gun by mounting it on reinforced steel platforms like this one. The gun was fixed to a central pivot and equipped with rollers that moved along a steel track embedded in the concrete ring, allowing for full 360-degree rotation. Using hand cranks, the crew could adjust both elevation and direction, firing time-fused shells into the sky in hopes of striking enemy aircraft or zeppelins. I found this strange tool while cleaning out my grandfather's garage. It clearly looks very old. What was it used for? What you found is a 19th century sugarcane cutter, a manual farm tool designed to chop thick stalks of sugarcane into shorter, more manageable sections. These cutters were commonly used on sugar plantations in the southern United States, especially in Louisiana, as well as on small farms that grew sorghum or cane for syrup. Before the advent of mechanized harvesters, tools like this played an important role in preparing cane for juicing, transport, or sale. I found this wooden tabletop game with 4 corner pockets hanging on a basement wall at my friend's house in the Midwest. There's a cue-like wooden dowel with rubber tips hanging above it, but neither of us knows how it's played or what it's called. Does anyone know what this game is? What you've found is a croquis board, a traditional disc-flicking game that blends elements of shuffleboard, carom, and curling into a fast-paced tabletop competition. Croquis is played by flicking wooden discs across the board, aiming for the highest-scoring inner rings while trying to knock your opponent's discs out of play. The earliest known crokinole board was handcrafted in 1876 in Ontario, Canada, and variations of the game may have roots in South Asian games like carom. In your version, the four-corner pockets are not part of standard gameplay, they're simply used to store playing pieces. Crokinole boards can be round or octagonal, and most are made of polished wood to allow smooth sliding of discs. I found this strange metal item in my grandpa's basement. It has a small hole on top of the spherical part, and the long tube is completely hollow. There's also a chain attached to it. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a bosun's whistle, also known as a bosun's call. It's a traditional signaling instrument once used on naval ships to issue commands when spoken orders couldn't be heard over the noise of the sea and crew. By blowing into the mouthpiece and covering or uncovering the small hole on the spherical end, the user could produce a variety of high-pitched notes, each corresponding to a specific command. Today, they are mostly used during formal events or kept as collector's items. I've seen several of these strange towers while traveling through Latvia. They all have the same design and feature these unusual spherical-looking elements, but I still have no idea what they're for. Does anyone know what these things are? What you've seen is a late Soviet water tower, most likely one of the variations of the Rozhnovsky Tower design. These towers have a recognizable structure with a tall central column and a cylindrical or multi-section tank at the top, and they were built to store water high above ground, so gravity could create stable pressure in local water systems for homes, farms, and small towns. This type of design appeared in the 1930s and became especially widespread after the 1950s, when the Soviet Union focused on rapid rural infrastructure development. By the 1970s and 1980s, thousands of these towers had been installed across Latvia and other former Soviet regions because they were simple, durable, and quick to build. I found this glass tube wrapped in electrical tape, and it has multiple metal pins coming out of the bottom. The top is a clear glass, and it rattles slightly when I shake it. It looks like some kind of vacuum tube, but I have no idea what it was used for. What you have is a photomultiplier tube, a very sensitive type of vacuum tube designed to detect extremely faint light. These devices convert tiny flashes of light into electrical signals by multiplying the effect millions of times. Inside the glass tube is a light-sensitive surface, along with a series of internal electrodes, and the metal pins at the base connect those elements to an external circuit that supplies high voltage. The clear glass at the top serves as the light entry window, and the electrical tape was most likely added later to prevent stray light from entering through the sides. Photomultiplier tubes became widely used from the mid-20th century onward in scientific and technical equipment. They were commonly found in radiation detectors, nuclear research instruments, medical imaging devices, and laboratory systems that needed to measure extremely low light levels. The design you found closely resembles a photomultiplier tube patented in 1941 by Vladimir Zworykin and Richard Snyder, whose work laid the foundation for the modern photomultiplier. I came across this unusual machine while visiting the Bodega Lopez Museum in Mendoza, Argentina. It stands about 4 feet tall and has 3 legs. Does anyone know what this was used for? What you found is a mechanical champagne dosing machine. This model from the 1980s was used to refill bottles with a precise amount of sugar and wine after disgorgement, the stage when yeast sediment is removed from bottle-fermented sparkling wine. The machine works by clamping freshly disgorged bottles into a sealed head and injecting a carefully measured dose under equalized pressure using carbon dioxide. This prevents any gushing or loss of bubbles that would otherwise occur if the wine came into contact with air. Devices like this first appeared in the 19th century and became widely used by the mid-20th century. They were adopted not only in France, but also in countries such as Argentina, Spain, Italy, and the United States, wherever traditional bottle-fermented sparkling wines were produced. I found this unusual device while working my route as a garbage man. It's made entirely of metal except for a glass bubble level, and it came in a leather case. One side has a protractor scale and 2 dials, while the other has a level that moves when I turn the large dial. What you found is a vernier clinometer, better known as an Abney level. It's a compact surveying instrument used to measure vertical angles and slopes, invented in the 1870s by British scientist and army officer Sir William Abney. This particular version was manufactured or sold by the Andrew Lloyd Company of Boston, a well-known scientific instrument maker active from the late 19th to mid-20th century. The Abney level combines a sighting tube, a protractor scale with degree markings, a vernier for fine angle readings, and a mounted bubble level. By looking through the eyepiece and adjusting the angle until the bubble is centered, a surveyor could measure the incline of a slope or determine the height of a distant object using simple trigonometry. This tool was widely used by civil engineers, railroad planners, foresters, and geologists throughout the early 20th century. I found this unusual machine in a closet at the astronomy department of the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis. Does anyone know what this device was used for? What you found is a precision astronomical chronograph, a specialized scientific instrument once used in observatories and geodetic surveys to measure time with extreme accuracy. This device recorded electrical time signals on a rotating paper drum, allowing observers to log the exact moment of a celestial event, such as a star crossing a telescope's reticle by tapping a key. The timing marks were then used to determine precise astronomical coordinates, measure sidereal time, or calibrate clocks. This particular type of chronograph was widely used in the United States from the mid-19th century through the mid-20th century. It played a key role in geodetic fieldwork conducted by the United States Coast and Geodetic Survey, helping to establish reference points known as Laplace stations. I came across this unusual metal pot at a local antique shop, and even the regulars there couldn't figure out what it was used for. It has a fixed concave lid with 2 holes, and one of them contains a captive wooden ball with small notches cut into it. The piece is about 7 inches across and has no markings at all. What you found is a ball marking and stencil pot, a tool once used for inking stencil brushes when labeling crates, boxes, or shipping containers. As the brush is pressed and moved against the exposed part of the wooden ball, the ball rotates and transfers ink from the reservoir inside the pot. This design helped apply just the right amount of ink evenly without overloading the brush. These stencil pots were common in factories, warehouses, and railroad depots from the early 1900s through the mid-20th century. The example you found closely matches models featured in catalogs from the 1930s and resembles patented designs dating back to the 1910s, including a 1915 version by George Remsnyder. I found this unusual compass-like device among a set of machining and measuring tools that once belonged to a marine and electrical engineer. It folds open, has a working compass, a sighting arm, and a protractor base with 2 spirit levels that can be adjusted with a knob. It says "Made in England," but has no other markings. What you've found is a Brunton Pocket Transit, a precision compass designed for fieldwork by geologists, surveyors, and engineers. This handheld instrument combines a magnetic compass, a clinometer for measuring slope angles, and a sighting system that allows the user to align the device with a distant point and simultaneously read the bearing, meaning the exact directional angle. Invented in 1894 by mining engineer David Brunton, the Pocket Transit was revolutionary in allowing a single person to take accurate directional and vertical angle measurements in the field without needing a tripod or assistant. The device quickly became popular with the United States Geological Survey, mining companies, and even the military, which adopted it under the name M2 compass. I found this unusual device mounted on a wooden board. It has a numbered dial at the top, a black knob, and a small switch on the side. There's also a wire coming out from the bottom. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a dental X-ray control pendant. It features a built-in mechanical timer and a push-button switch, allowing the operator to control the exposure duration without standing next to the machine. This type of pendant was commonly used from the 1930s through the 1950s, especially on units produced by companies like Ritter Dental. The operator would set the desired time using the dial and press the button to begin the X-ray exposure. The timer would then automatically shut off the beam when the set time expired, improving both safety and image consistency. I found this unusual tool while browsing at a Habitat for Humanity store. It has a vice-like jaw with a strange shape, and I was too intrigued not to buy it for 50 cents. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is an Elgin adjustable alligator wrench, a compact hand tool patented in 1897 and manufactured in Elgin, Illinois. Its distinctive jaw, shaped like an alligator's mouth, allowed it to grip square nuts, round pipes, and even worn bolts. The adjustable screw on top controls the movable jaw, while a flat spring inside helps it return to an open position when loosened. Though only about 7 inches long, it was a versatile multi-purpose wrench used by bicyclists, early motorists, and mechanics during a time when standardized fasteners were uncommon. I found this unusual weapon in my garage along with a machete, some bayonets, and combat knives. It feels like it's made of plastic or something similar, and even my father, who served in the military, has no idea what it is. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a cold steel gun stock war club, a modern replica of a traditional Native American weapon shaped like the stock of a musket. The pointed steel spike at the crook of the club was used for piercing, while the heavy flared end delivered powerful, crushing blows. Weapons of this type were used by indigenous warriors across the Great Lakes and Plains regions during the 18th and 19th centuries. Despite its resemblance to a musket stock, museums note that original gun stock war clubs were carved from solid wood blanks. Using an actual rifle stock would have made a weak weapon because of the cutouts for triggers and barrels. For that reason, the firearm shape was intentional mimicry. Archaeological findings support this as well, since none of the original war clubs uncovered in excavations show any signs that they were ever made from actual firearms. I saw these numbered poles and crisscrossing lines above a house in Southern California. The lines have small orange tags hanging from them. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a story pole installation, a temporary framework used to outline the future height and shape of a planned building. By marking roof lines, corners, and height limits, these poles help neighbors, planners, and city officials visualize the project before construction begins. This practice is especially common in parts of California, where strict building regulations and view preservation ordinances are in place. Professionals typically use leveling instruments or laser tools to ensure each pole is positioned with precision, accurately reflecting the structure's dimensions. I found this brass piece about 3.5 inches across in a canyon in Colorado, where people have lived since 1858. There are old miners' cabins and shacks nearby, but no one currently living there recognizes it. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is the brass cover of a soundbox, also known as a reproducer, from a wind-up gramophone made in the late 1920s or early 1930s. This part was mounted at the end of the tone arm and held the diaphragm and needle that turned the grooves in a record into sound. The diaphragm inside would vibrate in response to the motion of the needle, sending sound through the horn or internal chamber of the phonograph. It was most likely part of a portable phonograph. I found this unusual brass and wood object in a collection I bought at an auction. It looks like some kind of tool or maybe a key, but no one I've asked so far has been able to identify it. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is an elevator door circuit jumper, commonly referred to as a tomahawk by elevator technicians. This specialized tool was used during elevator maintenance to temporarily bypass the safety circuit that prevents an elevator from moving when a door is open. By bridging the electrical contacts inside the door lock mechanism, it tricks the system into thinking the door is securely closed and locked. This allowed trained personnel to move the car in manual mode for repairs, adjustments, or emergency operations. Tools like this were a routine part of an elevator mechanic's kit, especially in mid-20th century systems that lacked built-in diagnostic modes. However, misuse or failure to remove a jumper could result in serious accidents. I found this heavy cast iron object while cleaning out my grandfather's garage. It has a strange shape, and I have no idea what it was used for. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a cast iron cobbler's anvil, a specialized tool once used by shoemakers and repairmen to fix or reshape shoes. This type of anvil acted as a metal stand-in for a human foot, allowing cobblers to drive nails, attach soles, and hammer leather into shape without damaging the shoe. Historically, the role of a cobbler was quite different from that of a cordwainer. A cordwainer was a master shoemaker who crafted new shoes from scratch, while cobblers were restricted to repairing existing footwear. In fact, guild rules once prohibited cobblers from making new shoes entirely. I found this unusual metal object with a hollow tube, slots along the sides, a pointed tip, and a wide, flat top. It comes with a plastic peg that fits inside the tube. Does anyone know what it is? In the last video, I asked you to guess what this metal object with a wooden handle might be used for. Everyone had great guesses, and many of you got it right. This item is used to hold barbecue grill lids open while cooking food, allowing better airflow and temperature control during grilling. Modern 8-bit lights. For comparison, thank you to everyone who participated and shared your guesses. A special shout out to Ireland for being the first to correctly identify it. Of these memory planes. I came across this unusual piece of equipment at a vintage computer auction. It was sitting alongside large servers and tape storage systems, and the bottom drawer is full of patch cables. The seller suggested it might be a signal generator or some type of analog computer, but no one seems to know for sure. What you found is an EAI 180 analog computer, a hybrid computing system built by Electronic Associates Incorporated in the early 1970s. Unlike modern digital machines, this device solves mathematical problems by simulating them with continuous electrical voltages rather than step-by-step calculations. Designed primarily for engineering education and lab use, the EAI 180 allows users to model dynamic systems, from vibrating springs to electronic circuits, by wiring together equations on its front panel with patch cables. Once configured, the machine runs in real time, showing how systems behave by outputting voltage curves that can be read on meters or oscilloscopes. I found this old hand tool that used to belong to my grandpa, and neither my grandma nor I know what it was used for. It looks a bit like pincers, but the handle has a twisting mechanism, and when you turn it, the jaws slowly open and close. It doesn't seem practical for pulling nails, which makes me doubt that's what it was meant for. What you have is a hand vise, sometimes called a jeweler's or watchmaker's hand vise. It is a small handheld clamping tool with metal jaws and a screw mechanism that opens and closes the jaws evenly when the top is turned. Instead of squeezing like pliers, the twisting action allows the user to apply controlled pressure, which makes it ideal for holding tiny or delicate objects. Tools like this were used to grip small screws, wires, pins, watch parts, or jewelry components while filing, drilling, sawing, or polishing. I found this unusual tool in a mechanic's workshop and haven't been able to figure out what it is. It has a dial that raises and lowers the wedge when turned. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a throttle pedal depressor. It was used by mechanics to hold a vehicle's accelerator pedal at a fixed position during engine diagnostics or maintenance. This allowed the engine to maintain a steady number of revolutions per minute without requiring someone to sit in the driver's seat. These tools became common in the mid-20th century as cars phased out hand throttles and engine tuning increasingly required a consistent engine speed. They were especially useful during tasks such as carburetor adjustment, emissions testing, or checking alternator output under load. I found this fire hydrant standing in shallow water on a submerged beach in Oka National Park, Canada. There are no nearby roads, no buildings, and only forest around. The beach was covered by just about 2 meters of water, so under normal conditions it would be dry. Does anyone know why this hydrant is here? What you found is a dry hydrant, a type commonly used in rural or wooded areas. Unlike city hydrants that are connected to pressurized water mains, dry hydrants are designed to allow firefighters to draw water directly from lakes or ponds using a pump truck. All right, it's time for another mystery item. Take a look at this strange plastic object. What do you think it might be used for? Leave your guesses in the What you found is a Batek mobility handbike attachment, a specialized device that transforms a manual wheelchair into a powered tricycle. It connects to the front of the wheelchair, lifting the small front casters and replacing them with a large single wheel controlled by handlebars. This device was invented in Spain by Pau Bach, a quadriplegic who built the first prototype in his garage after a motorcycle accident. Since 2006, Batek Mobility has grown into a global company offering several models. The attachment can be clicked on and off in seconds, giving users the freedom to move independently without having to transfer out of their wheelchair. I came across this strange fitting on the wall in my house, which is more than 100 years old. It has a round conduit running up into the ceiling, and the bottom part can be twisted. This is an antique wall-mounted gas light fixture from the late 19th or early 20th century. Before electricity became common in homes, gas was the main source of indoor lighting, and fixtures like this one were built directly into the walls. Turning the small lever on the valve would release gas into the burner, which was then lit with a match to produce light. The missing pieces would have included the burner tip and the glass globe or shade. I found this unusual stainless steel rod that's been used as a handrail for over 30 years. It's extremely heavy and has a distinctive wavy shape, and it was originally purchased from a scrapyard. I doubt it was made to be a handrail. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a stainless steel rotor from a progressive cavity pump, more specifically, a mud motor rotor used in oil and gas drilling. Its original purpose was to convert fluid pressure into mechanical rotation deep underground. In simple terms, this rotor worked like a heavy-duty metal screw inside a matching rubber sleeve. When pressurized liquid was pumped through it, the rotor was forced to turn. That spinning motion was then used to power a drill bit or move very thick fluids. The technology dates back to the 1930s, when French engineer René Moineau invented the progressive cavity pump. It was later adapted in the 1950s for downhole motors in the oil field, becoming a key part of directional drilling systems. My stepdad gave me this solid iron tool that belonged to his great-grandfather. It weighs 6 pounds and is made of wrought iron. Does anyone know what it is? This is a hardy blacksmith stump anvil, a portable forging tool designed to be driven into a wooden stump or heavy base. These tools were commonly used by traveling blacksmiths, farriers, and frontier craftsmen. Stump anvils like this date back centuries and were still in use into the early 20th century. I found this object labeled Chart Pack and made in USA. The flat white part twists to reveal numbers, and when the object is held upright, a silver piece pops out of the bottom. There are no visible moving parts connecting the two sections. Does anyone know what this is? What you found is a Chart Pack adjustable burnisher, a specialized tool used in graphic design during the pre-digital era to apply dry transfer lettering. These rub-on letters were once a standard in advertising, drafting, and publishing, and the burnisher helped ensure they transferred cleanly and evenly from the sheet to paper or board. This model features a rolling metal tip that's spring-loaded, allowing it to maintain consistent pressure as you rub over each letter or graphic. Twisting the white plastic end adjusts the internal tension, giving the user precise control, more pressure for bold fonts, lighter pressure for delicate ones. The wide, flat end is also a functional tool used to smooth and press down large areas or to reburnish finished transfers for better adhesion. Chart Pack introduced this burnisher in the 1970s alongside its Velvet Touch lettering line. If any of our viewers have used this tool before, we'd love to hear your experience in the comments. I found this in my grandpa's stuff. It's a 6-inch metal tool with a small hole at one end and a sliding piece connected to the Craftsman nameplate. Does anyone know what this was used for? What you found is a vintage Craftsman hand sight level, also known as a lock-type hand level. This compact optical tool combines a bubble level and a sighting lens to let users establish a horizontal line of sight across a distance. It was commonly used in the mid-20th century for rough leveling tasks, like checking ground slopes, aligning fence posts, or grading landscapes. The design goes back to an 1850 patent by John Locke, who first developed the style of handheld level for surveyors and geologists. Sears later offered this model under the Craftsman brand, making it accessible to farmers, builders, and homeowners. When you look through the eyepiece, you can see the landscape ahead while also viewing the reflection of the bubble inside. Once the bubble is centered on the internal reference line, your line of sight is level with your eye. The sliding piece near the nameplate adjusts the focus, and the small hole at the end lets in light to illuminate the bubble vial. I found this in a pen drawer, but I'm not sure what it is. It looks like a metal pen refill, but it has 2 evenly spaced recesses near the tip and no markings or branding anywhere on the body. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a center spindle from a vintage automatic record changer used for stacking and playing multiple vinyl records in sequence. This removable spindle would be inserted in place of the standard short spindle on a turntable and allowed several LPs to be loaded at once. As each record finished playing, the spindle's internal mechanism would release the next one, allowing it to drop onto the platter automatically. Spindles like this were common on mid-20th century record players and stereo consoles made by manufacturers such as Gerard, Dual, and Admiral. I found this old metal box with a hinged lid while helping my dad remodel a house. Inside are a red and a white bulb, and there's a push button on the back that turns them on. The only marking is a 120-volt label next to the wiring, and the lid seems to have a second hinge in the middle, though it's too rusted to move. What you found is a mid-20th century contact printing lightbox, likely made by Ansco in the 1950s. It was used in home darkrooms to create photographic contact prints, positive images made by placing a film negative directly against photo paper and exposing them both to light. Inside the box is a built-in light source with two bulbs, typically a white bulb for exposure and a red one that served as a safe light during setup. The hinged lid held the negative and photographic paper tightly against the glass surface. Once the lid was closed and the light switched on, the image was exposed onto the paper through the negative. The resulting print was then developed using traditional darkroom chemicals. I found this old metal tool in the grass while mowing. It looks like some kind of small pickaxe, but I'm not sure what it was used for. Does anyone know what this is? What you found is a welder's chipping hammer, a hand tool used for removing slag that forms on top of certain types of welds. The pointed end is used to crack and break the slag layer, while the chisel-shaped end is used to chip it away and clean the weld bead beneath. This allows the welder to inspect the quality of the weld or apply another pass. The open loop at the bottom is part of a shock-absorbing spring handle, which helps reduce vibration and hand fatigue during repeated use. Chipping hammers like this one became standard equipment during the rise of arc welding in the early 20th century. They were especially important for stick welding and flux-cored arc welding, both of which leave behind a layer of brittle flux residue that must be removed. I had one of these as a kid, and now my kids have one too. Does anyone remember what this toy is called? This is a classic toy known as a Jacob's ladder. It consists of a series of connected wooden blocks that appear to cascade downward as you tilt it. The illusion is created by a clever ribbon arrangement that allows each block to flip over in sequence under its own weight. The Jacob's ladder has been around for centuries and was already popular by the mid-19th century. Victorian versions often featured printed images, and some even included bells to enhance the sound as the blocks flipped. The toy was sometimes called magic tablets or click-clack blocks, but the name Jacob's Ladder comes from the biblical story of Jacob's dream of a ladder reaching to heaven. Because of this religious association, the toy was even allowed as a Sunday pastime in strict Puritan households. I found this wooden item in my great-uncle's garage. It folds flat and looks like it was meant to hold something, but I'm not sure what it was used for. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a folding gout stool designed to support an elevated leg. It folds flat for easy storage and was commonly used in the 19th and early 20th centuries as a therapeutic aid to reduce swelling and relieve pain. Gout is a form of inflammatory arthritis that causes sudden and intense pain, most often in the foot or ankle. Elevating the affected leg helps reduce pressure on the joint and improve circulation, easing the discomfort. This type of stool became popular in the Georgian era, when gout was associated with wealth and overindulgence. Early versions were often custom-made from fine wood and upholstery, and some featured adjustable or rocking designs. I found this small device that looks like a flash drive, but it's not recognized by a computer. It's about the size of a quarter and has a loop for a keychain. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a USB magnetic charger for the Blackburn Flea series of LED bike lights. The two metal contacts on the flat surface connect magnetically to a matching set on the flea light itself, delivering power from any USB port directly to the light's internal battery. The Blackburn Flea was launched in the late 2000s and was one of the first bike lights to use a magnetically attached USB charger. Blackburn even offered a solar charging option and a quirky AA battery adapter for topping it up on the go. I found this structure in Marquette, Michigan. It sits right over the water by the lake. Does anyone know what it was used for? What you found is an abandoned ore dock. These docks were a key part of the Great Lakes shipping network, especially during the 19th and early 20th centuries, when iron mining and steel production were at their peak. This particular example is located in Marquette, Michigan, which was home to the very first ore dock built on the Great Lakes in the 1850s. The structure you see is likely the Lower Harbor Ore Dock, built in 1931 and decommissioned in 1971. Ore docks like this worked by allowing trains to dump ore into large storage bins on top. When a ship pulled up alongside, chutes were lowered, allowing tons of ore to flow down into the cargo holds below. I saw this being transported past my workplace in downtown Norfolk, Virginia. The whole thing looked like a perfectly smooth gray sphere, about 12 feet in diameter, sitting on a flatbed trailer. It barely cleared the traffic light as it passed. Considering there are many military bases in the area, I wonder if it might be military related. What you saw is almost certainly a radome, a large, protective, weatherproof shell made from materials that are transparent to radio waves. Its purpose is to shield sensitive radar equipment from wind, weather, debris, ice, and other environmental factors that could interfere with performance. The spherical shape is one of the most common radome designs, especially for large, fixed radar installations or long-range tracking systems. This type of enclosure is engineered to allow the antenna inside to rotate or scan freely in any direction without obstruction. I found this small device at a thrift store. When I pull the handle, something inside winds up. The back says Conair, Japan, but I couldn't find any information online. Does anyone know what it is? This is a mechanical self-timer, commonly used with older cameras to delay the shutter release. These devices allowed photographers to include themselves in the photo or to reduce camera shake during long exposures. The mechanism works by winding an internal clockwork, which then unwinds over a set delay, usually between 5 and 10 seconds, and triggers the shutter at the end of that interval. A friend who runs an antique shop found this small hand tool, and we're not sure what it's for. It has a shaped wooden handle like old kitchen utensils, and 2 metal balls mounted at the top that spin freely. Could it have been used for something like pastry or leather work? The tool you found is a classic razor blade stropper, a type of vintage razor blade sharpener patented on September 25, 1923 by Ralph Bird and sold by the Ace Hardware Manufacturing Company in the early 20th century. It was designed to resharpen double-edged safety razor blades by drawing the blade between 2 stropping rollers to polish and realign the edge so it could be reused. In its day, this kind of razor blade stropper was marketed as a money-saving accessory for the home, especially during the 1920s and 1930s, when disposable blades were still relatively costly and many consumers preferred to maximize their life. We found this object in our backyard in a hole the dogs had been digging just after it rained. We live near a canal, but the water has never gone over the wall. It was about 2 steps from our pool cage. AA battery for scale. Does anyone know what it is? What you found appears to be a megalodon tooth, or at least a replica of one. The shape, size, and triangular profile all closely resemble the fossilized teeth of the prehistoric shark Ototus megalodon, one of the largest predators to ever inhabit Earth's oceans. These teeth can range from 3 to over 7 inches long. Megalodon lived roughly 23 to 3.6 million years ago and is believed to have grown up to 50-60 feet in length. Its teeth are often the only parts that fossilize, since the rest of a shark's skeleton is made of cartilage. These fossils are commonly found in coastal areas like Florida, the Carolinas, and other parts of the eastern United States. I found this unusual contraption at a garage sale in Texas. It's made from bicycle parts, including a full frame and 2 wheel rims, along with several brass wind instruments mounted underneath. It looks really cool, but I have no idea what it's supposed to do. Does anyone know what this is? What you found is a sculptural musical instrument called the lo-fi cycle, created by artist and composer Steve Parker as part of Austin's Art in Public Places program. The concept behind it is to transform familiar mechanical parts into musical tools, inviting passers-by to experiment with sound in unexpected ways. The bike's wheels are modified in a style inspired by composer John Cage's prepared piano technique. Various metal objects are attached to the spokes and rims, so when the wheels spin, they strike, rattle, or scrape to create percussive sounds. Some spokes are replaced with guitar or bass strings, which produce pitched tones as they vibrate. Brass horns of different sizes are mounted underneath, and when their rubber bulbs are squeezed, they emit honks and squeaks at different pitches. The result is a whimsical mix of mechanical noise and acoustic music. A friend posted this on Facebook asking what it is, but none of us could figure it out. It looks like a vintage metal device, possibly used to hold or heat something. Does anyone know what it is? This is a Siegel steam spray inhaler, a 19th century medical device designed to deliver medicated vapor directly into the lungs. It worked by heating water with a small spirit lamp to produce steam, which then passed through an atomizer. The patient would inhale the medicated steam through a funnel or mouthpiece to treat conditions like bronchitis, asthma, or laryngitis. Invented in 1864 by German physician Dr. Emil Siegel, this device marked a major advancement in respiratory therapy. Siegel's innovation was to use steam pressure to drive the atomization process, making the inhaler self-sustaining and eliminating the need for manual pumps. His design quickly spread across Europe and influenced later devices, becoming the first practical nebulizer in medical history. It even inspired surgical antiseptic sprays, such as those used by Joseph Lister. I found this strange object in my grandfather's attic. It's made of very hard leather and has a round opening with what looks like a screen inside. Does anyone know what it is? This is a sailmaker's palm, a traditional hand tool used to push needles through heavy materials like canvas or leather. Worn over the hand like a partial glove, it features a built-in thimble plate that allows the user to apply force without injuring their palm. The tool dates back to at least the 17th century and became standard equipment for sailors and maritime craftsmen during the Age of Sail. By the 19th and early 20th centuries, sailmakers' palms were being mass-produced with adjustable buckles and improved metal thimble inserts. Even today, versions of this tool are still used by leatherworkers and canvas repairers. I saw this strange ladder-like structure on the stern of the USS Yorktown. It doesn't appear usable as an actual ladder. The lowest rung is far from the water, and the top doesn't reach the main deck. Even the tour guide didn't know what it was. Does anyone know what this is? This is a set of drop lights, vertical alignment lights, mounted on the stern of an aircraft carrier. These lights are part of the Precision Approach Landing System and are designed to help pilots visually align with the center line of the flight deck during night landings or in low visibility conditions. As the pilot approaches the ship, the drop lights appear directly below the deck's center line lights. When the aircraft is properly aligned, the two sets of lights visually merge into a single straight line. If the aircraft drifts off course, the lights appear offset or angled, prompting the pilot to adjust heading and realign with the deck. Drop lights were introduced in the mid-20th century as part of the broader evolution of naval aviation landing systems. Early versions consisted of simple vertical rows of red lamps mounted on the ship's fantail, serving as a visual extension of the flight deck centerline. This concept is widely attributed to naval engineer Thomas Momiyama, who also contributed to the development of deck lighting systems used across the fleet. By the late 1990s, the United States Navy introduced an advanced laser-based successor known as the Long-Range Lineup System. This system replaced traditional lamps with color-coded lasers, allowing pilots to acquire lineup guidance from distances of up to 6 miles, even in poor visibility. I found this item in the storage area of a maritime museum where I work. It's an aluminum tube with a conical lead tip on one end and what looks like a shotgun shell on the other. There's an engraved inscription on the side, along with a serial number. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a whale marking DART, a specialized scientific tagging projectile used in early marine research. These darts were fired from a shotgun into a whale's blubber to mark individual animals. This system allowed researchers to identify whales that were later encountered again, providing valuable information about migration routes and population movements. The method was developed in the early 20th century as part of large-scale whale research programs, most notably those associated with British scientific expeditions. Engineers and biologists refined the design so the dart would remain embedded without causing serious injury. By the 1930s and 1940s, thousands of whales had been marked this way, producing the first reliable data on long-distance whale migration. I found this thin metal piece buried in the dirt at a job site. The knurled knob in the center tightens the two halves together. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is the handle end of a leather razor strop, a classic tool used to maintain the edge of straight razors. Before each shave, the blade would be drawn along the leather to realign and polish its edge, ensuring a smooth and comfortable cut. Leather strops have been in use since at least the 18th century, evolving from simple harness straps to specialized tools. By the late 1800s, inventors were patenting improved strop designs with tensioners, swivels, and dual leather canvas sides. Some even came pre-treated with stropping compounds. Among the notable figures was African-American entrepreneur Hunter Haynes, who marketed a ready-to-use strop nationwide in the early 1900s. Barbers and home shavers alike relied on them, and many vintage examples featured padded leather handles like the one in your photo. I found this strange tool while cleaning out a warehouse at the mattress factory where I work. It has a wooden handle, an electric cord, and rotating wheels with numbers from 0 to 9. No one here knows what it's for. Does anyone know what this is? What you found is a numbering branding iron, a tool used to burn permanent numbers into wood. These were commonly used in warehouses, factories, and workshops to mark crates, pallets, wooden components, or equipment with serial numbers, batch codes, or dates. By heating the metal head and pressing it against the wood, the raised numbers would char the surface, leaving a durable mark that wouldn't wear off or wash away. Tools like this were widely used from the late 19th century through the mid-20th century. I came across a photo of this old vehicle. It has a large ball-shaped object mounted on top. Does anyone know what this unusual machine was used for? This is a TR-26C refueling tank, a little-known Soviet prototype from the mid-1930s designed to supply fuel to frontline armored units. Built on the chassis of the T-26 light tank, it featured a large cylindrical fuel tank and a compact pumping system. Its mission was to refuel other tanks directly in the field, without relying on soft-skinned trucks that were highly vulnerable to enemy fire. This experimental vehicle was part of a broader Soviet effort to adapt support vehicles for armored warfare. Two distinct variants were built between 1935 and 1936. The first had a rectangular armored compartment for fuel inside the hull. The second took a more radical approach, replacing the turret with a massive cylindrical tank mounted externally on a frame, increasing fuel capacity to nearly 500 gallons. A crew of 2 operated the vehicle, and it could use multiple hoses to refuel several tanks quickly. But despite its innovative concept, tests revealed serious drawbacks. The fuel tanks were lightly protected, and in combat the vehicle posed a major fire risk. In the end, the Red Army canceled the project and dismantled the prototypes. I found these at an antique shop. They look like steps that would screw into something and float out from the wall. Does anyone know what they are? What you found is an antique carriage step, also known as a buggy step or foot iron. These were attached to the side or underframe of a horse-drawn carriage to help passengers climb in and out more easily. Typically made of heavy cast iron, each step was designed to support a person's full weight and would project outward like a small platform, often with a textured surface for grip. Carriage steps were widely used in the 19th century and came in many variations, from simple curved brackets to more ornate versions with cast patterns or folding mechanisms. I received 4 of these small metal objects in the mail today. The pin at the top doesn't move, and I have no idea what they're for. Does anyone know what this is? What you found is a fly tying bobbin, a small handheld tool used in fly fishing to create artificial flies. Its purpose is to hold a spool of thread and maintain steady tension while the thread is wrapped around a hook to secure feathers, fur, and other materials. The bobbin holds the spool between 2 springy arms and guides the thread through a narrow metal tube. As the tier wraps the thread, it unwinds smoothly without tangling. When released, the bobbin hangs freely, keeping the thread under consistent tension. I found this small metal object on the ground and have no idea what it might be. It has a smooth shaft with a flat end, and the top features a decorative cutout that vaguely resembles a swastika. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is the sliding lock mechanism from a 19th century Qing dynasty opium pillow chest. This small brass piece functioned as a locking pin rather than a turning key. It was part of an opium pillow box, a dual-purpose object that served both as a hard headrest and as a storage chest for opium pipes, tools, money, and other personal items. Opium pillow chests became common in China during the 19th century, when opium smoking was widespread. Craftsmen adapted the long tradition of hard pillows by adding a concealed storage compartment secured with a simple sliding lock, allowing the owner to keep valuables safely hidden while reclining. I found this old metal item at work. The top piece has a pin and screws into the bottle-shaped part. It's about 3 inches long, and no one seems to know what it was used for. What you found is a vintage watchmaker's oil bottle, also known as a fountain oiler. This small metal container was designed to store and dispense tiny amounts of lubricant used in the maintenance of mechanical watches and other fine instruments. The cap contains a fine needle that delivers a precise drop of oil to gears, pivots, or jewel bearings. Tools like this were commonly used in the late 19th and early 20th centuries by watchmakers and clock repairers. The fine needle operates through capillary action, or a small valve, allowing the oil to flow only when the tip touches the surface. These bottles often held animal-based oils, such as whale or porpoise oil, prized for their stability before synthetic alternatives were developed. I found a whole trunk full of these in a house we recently bought. From what I can tell, they might be ashtrays, but I'm not completely sure. Does anyone know what it is? This is a vintage collection of mid-century silent butlers. Popular between the 1930s and 1960s, these items were used to sweep away crumbs after meals or to empty full ashtrays during gatherings. I found a set of keys with this long metal rod attached. It's not very heavy. Does anyone know what it is? This is a kubaton, a compact self-defense tool designed to be carried on a keychain. Measuring about 5.5 inches long, the kubaton is small enough to fit in your hand, but sturdy enough to enhance the power of a punch or to target sensitive areas on an attacker's body. The kubaton was invented in the late 1960s by Japanese-American karate master Takayuki Kubota, originally as a non-lethal restraint device for the Los Angeles Police Department. By the 1980s, it had entered civilian self-defense training and was widely marketed to women and the general public. I found this round metal object while cleaning out my grandpa's garage. It's completely solid with no openings, but it feels like there are loose pieces of glass or something rattling inside. The surface has Asian-style carvings and symbols. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a Chinese longevity peach statue, commonly called a birthday peach. It's a solid brass ornament shaped like a peach and covered in symbolic reliefs, typically featuring the god of longevity and a crowd of cheerful children. In Chinese culture, peaches symbolize immortality, and children represent blessings of a large, happy family. This type of statue was traditionally given as a gift to elders on birthdays to wish them a long life filled with prosperity and descendants. I found these small, rectangular objects in an old dump site in New Hampshire inside a rusted tin can. Most of the surrounding items date from the 1930s to 1950s. The man who owned the property was an auto mechanic. These pieces are about 1 inch by 1/2 inch in size. The outer part feels like soft plastic, while the center appears to be made of something like cardboard or possibly charcoal. Does anyone know what these are? What you found are internal cells from a 9-volt battery, specifically the flat, rectangular type that has been used in both carbon zinc and alkaline batteries since the mid-20th century. While today's standard 9-volt batteries usually contain 6 small 1.5-volt cells connected in series, earlier versions used layered rectangular cells instead. These cells were built using alternating electrodes of zinc and manganese dioxide, separated by fiber or cardboard soaked in electrolyte. The primary function of these electrodes was to collect electrons from the chemical reactions occurring inside the battery. This construction proved highly reliable and durable, which is why some manufacturers continue to use it even today. We found this strange metal canister packed in foam and cardboard, delivered on a donation truck from Chewy. They sometimes include random items that aren't always pet-related, so we're not sure what this could be. This is an undeployed automotive airbag inflator, a key component of a vehicle's safety system. It's a small gas generator housed in a sealed metal canister designed to rapidly inflate an airbag in the event of a crash. When the vehicle's sensors detect a severe impact, the inflator ignites a chemical propellant that produces a burst of nitrogen gas, filling the airbag within milliseconds. The explosion occurs fast enough to cushion the driver or passenger before they collide with the car's interior. Inflators like this are typically housed inside steering wheels, dashboards, or side panels. I came across this large pile of rusted metal rings while hiking through a remote forest. Each ring is made from twisted steel cable, and they're all interlinked, forming a kind of chain or mesh. What could this have been used for? What you found is most likely part of a torpedo net, a heavy-duty naval defense system used primarily from the late 19th century through the first half of the 20th century. These nets were made from thick steel cable formed into large interlinked rings, creating a flexible but extremely strong mesh. Beginning in the 1890s, major navies faced a new threat from self-propelled torpedoes, which could strike below the waterline and cause catastrophic damage. To counter this, ships were fitted with long horizontal booms that projected outward from the hull. From these booms, the torpedo net was suspended several feet away from the ship's side. If a torpedo struck the net, it would detonate at a distance from the hull, greatly reducing the damage or preventing penetration altogether. Torpedo nets saw widespread use in the years leading up to the First World War and were tested extensively by the British, German, Russian, and Japanese navies. However, as torpedoes became faster and more powerful, and as attackers began firing multiple torpedoes at the same point, the effectiveness of these nets declined. By the later stages of World War I, most major navies had shifted toward internal defenses such as anti-torpedo bulges built into ship hulls. Despite this, torpedo nets were not completely abandoned. During the Second World War, they were revived for use on ships at anchor and for protecting harbors, ports, and other critical infrastructure. I found this small metal figure in my dad's collection. He's had it for about 30 years. It's about 1.25 inches tall, made of a Monopoly-like metal, and was originally found in the Chicago area. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a Kinder Surprise toy, a miniature Roman soldier figurine made of metal, likely from the late 1980s or early 1990s. These collectible figures were part of a historical series that included Roman legionnaires, musketeers, and other themed characters. Kinder Surprise eggs have been a beloved product in Europe since their debut in 1974, but they were banned in the United States for decades due to regulations against embedding toys inside food. To get around this ban, Ferrero developed a new version in 2018 called Kinder Joy. Unlike the original, Kinder Joy is split into two halves. One side contains a sweet, creamy dessert, and the other holds a fully sealed toy capsule. I saw workers stacking hundreds of these black crate-like structures underground. One of them said they're building a fountain. What are these crates used for? What you saw was a system of plastic structures installed underground to temporarily store rainwater. These crate-like units form a hidden reservoir designed to control runoff, reduce flooding, and support more sustainable water management in urban environments. In this case, they're likely being used to create an underground cistern that collects rainwater for a decorative fountain, holding enough water to keep it filled without fully relying on potable water. Although lightweight, the grid-like crates are engineered to support the weight of soil, pavement, or even vehicles above. When assembled in large numbers and wrapped in filtration fabric, they form a high-capacity tank that gradually releases water into the surrounding soil or drainage system, closely mimicking natural infiltration. I found this strange blue object clamped around the main water line in my house. It doesn't have any wires and can rotate around the pipe. It's been there since we bought the house. Does anyone know what it is? What you saw is a magnetic water conditioner, a passive, clip-on device designed to treat water using magnetic fields. It typically contains strong permanent magnets housed in a plastic shell that clamps around a water pipe. The idea is that as water flows through the pipe, the magnetic field alters how mineral particles behave, supposedly reducing scale buildup on appliances and pipes. While there's no solid scientific consensus that these devices actually prevent limescale, they remain popular among homeowners looking for maintenance-free and salt-free alternatives to traditional water softeners. In some cases, these magnets can also attract small ferrous particles such as rust, effectively serving as a simple trap for iron sediment. I found this sharp, spear-like metal piece that's just a bit smaller than a pencil. Near the base, there's a narrow slot and a break in the metal that allows it to flex slightly, maybe so it can clip onto something or so something else can attach to it. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a sailmaker's needle, a heavy-duty hand-sewing needle designed for working with thick materials like canvas, sailcloth, and leather. Its sharp, spear-shaped point and elongated slot near the base are distinctive features, allowing it to pierce dense fabric and carry strong, waxed twine. Sailmaker's needles have been used for centuries, especially during the age of sail, when repairing sails at sea was essential for survival. Even today, similar needles are still used by sailors, canvas workers, leather crafters, and outdoor enthusiasts for repairing sails, tents, packs, and other heavy fabric gear. I found this heavily rusted double-barrel gun while digging in my garden in Hungary. Each barrel is about 4 to 6 inches long. Does anyone know what kind of gun this is? What you found appears to be the rusted remains of a howdah pistol, a powerful double-barrel handgun that was widely used during the 19th century in British-controlled regions of Africa and India. These pistols were originally designed as emergency weapons for hunters who rode in howdahs. The large seats mounted atop elephants and needed a reliable sidearm to protect themselves from charging tigers, lions, or other dangerous animals at close range. Though initially intended for protection against wild animals, howdah pistols eventually found their way into military service as backup weapons for British officers. By the turn of the 20th century, however, they were largely replaced by more practical top-break revolvers. I found this object in an old shed. It's about the size of a pen, but it clearly isn't for writing. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is an electronic alignment tool, commonly known as a tweaker or diddle stick. It's a small, non-metallic screwdrivers used to fine-tune sensitive components in radios, televisions, and other electronic devices, especially in circuits involving radio frequencies. These tools became essential in the mid-20th century, when televisions and radios required manual alignment of coils, capacitors, and transformers for optimal performance. Technicians used them to calibrate signal frequencies, improve picture quality, or fine-tune audio circuits. The one in your photo resembles popular models made by companies like GC Electronics in the 1960s, often carried in a shirt pocket like a pen. We found this under the foundation while renovating our house. It looks like a military medal, possibly from the Civil War era. The eagle is holding a sword, with 2 crossed cannons and a stack of cannonballs below. On the back, we can make out the word Army on the upper left edge. What you found is likely a badge from the Grand Army of the Republic, a fraternal organization of Union veterans formed after the Civil War. The brass hanger, featuring an eagle with outstretched wings perched on crossed cannons and cannonballs, was the top portion of the Grand Army of the Republic membership medal, officially adopted in 1869. Originally, this eagle hanger would have held a ribbon that connected it to a 5-pointed bronze star, the official emblem worn by Union veterans. Your find is missing the ribbon and star, but the surviving parts are significant. The circular medallion attached to the hanger might be from a special Grand Army of the Republic reunion badge or an anniversary medal, since some of these featured round bronze drops instead of the standard star. I found this ruby red peg votive holder at a flea market. Under regular light, it looks like deep red glass with no yellow tint, but under black light, it glows a vivid yellow. The outer surface lights up brightly, while the inside shows only a few yellow streaks. Has anyone seen glass like this before? What you found is most likely amberina glass, a decorative type of art glass known for its distinctive red to amber coloration and its strong reaction under ultraviolet light. In normal lighting, amberina appears as deep ruby red glass with little or no visible yellow, especially when the amber portion is thin or concentrated toward the surface. Under black light, however, the glass fluoresces a vivid yellow or yellow-orange due to the presence of cadmium-based colorants in the amber layer, which explains the dramatic glow you observed. Amberina was first developed in the United States in the 1880s and was prized for its rich color gradient and visual impact. The glass was made by selectively reheating parts of a heat-sensitive formula, creating a seamless transition between red and amber in a single piece. I found this wooden fixture in the basement of a house in Kansas City, Missouri, It's mounted into the wall of a shared space and has a short central dowel, about 1 inch in diameter. The opening is roughly 11 inches tall. It almost looks like a paper towel holder, but the dowel seems too short for that. Does anyone know what this was used for? What you saw is a vintage wall-mounted pool talc holder, designed to hold a cone of hand chalk. Players used it to keep their bridge hand dry during a game, helping the cue slide smoothly. These fixtures were common in mid-20th century American pool halls and home game rooms, especially in humid regions. The chalk cone sat on the small central peg, and players would lightly rub their hand around its surface to reduce friction. Some versions even included decorative features like towel hooks or carved trim to match the surrounding billiard decor. I was at a bar last night and saw this detailed technical drawing hanging on the wall. It shows a cross-section of what looks like an old mechanical engine. None of the staff could tell me what it was. Does anyone know what it is? This is a cross-section illustration of a Bellis and Morecambe high-speed steam engine, a revolutionary type of compact vertical steam engine developed in England in the late 19th century. These engines were designed specifically to drive electrical generators at high speeds using a unique forced lubrication system. The company was founded in Birmingham in 1852, and by the 1890s, its engineers had introduced groundbreaking patents that allowed steam engines to run at 400 to 600 revolutions per minute, more than triple the speed of traditional models. Bellis and Morecambe engines powered early lighting systems in British cities, were used by the Royal Navy to generate electricity aboard warships, and even appeared in experimental steam buses and industrial laundries. The vertical design saved space, and their precision made them ideal for the fast-growing world of electric power. I found this measuring instrument in a family heirloom closet. The note inside the case mentions Gunther Edmund, Mathematical Instruments, 1673. What was this tool used to measure? What you found is a 17th century sector, also known as a proportional compass, one of the earliest analog calculating devices used in Europe. It consists of 2 hinged brass arms with engraved scales, and it was designed to perform a wide range of mathematical operations, including multiplication, division, trigonometry, geometry, and scaling. Sectors like this were used by artillery officers, navigators, surveyors, engineers, and architects from the late 16th century through the early 19th. This particular example, with French inscriptions, was possibly crafted by the renowned Parisian instrument maker Michael Butterfield, who was active between 1677 and 1735. The sector played a key role in the development of practical mathematics. It was favored by notable scientists like Galileo, who developed his own version around 1597 and used it to teach ballistics. By the mid-17th century, sectors had become standard tools in Europe and even made their way to colonial America, where surveyors and engineers used them to chart new territories. I found this small wooden box among electrical and radio equipment in an elderly gentleman's workshop. It looks like a battery might fit in the lower left compartment. What was this device used for? What you found is a portable medical induction coil, commonly known in its time as a faradic battery. These small wooden boxes were sold in the late 19th and early 20th centuries as home electrotherapy devices. When connected to a battery, the coil inside would generate mild electrical pulses, which users applied to their skin through electrodes. The idea was to stimulate nerves and muscles, and these devices were often marketed as cures for everything from headaches and fatigue to paralysis. Though based on real scientific principles like Faraday's law of electromagnetic induction, these devices quickly entered the realm of quack medicine. Dozens of manufacturers promoted them in newspapers and mail-order catalogs, promising miraculous results. Today, we know they had little real medical value, but they played a key role in the public's fascination with electricity at the dawn of the modern age. My dad found this lightweight metal object in an antique shop, and the owner did not know what it was. It has a handle on the side, a textured cylindrical body, and pointed cone-shaped ends on both sides. It feels like thin tin rather than heavy steel, and the shop owner was selling it for $10. Does anyone know what it is? What your dad found is a guira, a handheld metal percussion instrument most closely associated with Dominican merengue and bachata music. A player holds the side handle with one hand and scrapes the raised bumps with a stiff metal brush or scraper in the other hand. That scraping produces the bright, raspy rhythm that drives entire Latin dance bands. The guira evolved in the Dominican Republic during the 19th century as a metal replacement for the older gourd guiro. By the 20th century, it became an essential part of merengue ensembles, often paired with the tambora drum to create the signature driving rhythm of the genre. A popular torpedo version was patented in the United States by Martin Cohen of Latin Percussion in 1977. Unlike the classic design, it has a distinctive cylindrical body with tapered ends and a continuous textured surface, and it is filled with small metal beads. Because of that, the torpedo can also be used like a maraca. I found this small metal tool stuck in a cinder block wall while out on a run. It has a hook-shaped tip, a groove in the back, and a filament running through the hole at the bottom, which makes me think it might get hot. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a taser dart, a wire-tethered projectile fired from a conducted electrical weapon. These darts are launched in pairs from a taser device using compressed gas and are designed to pierce clothing or skin, delivering a high-voltage, low-current electrical shock that disrupts muscle control and temporarily incapacitates the target. Taser darts have been used since the 1970s, first developed by NASA scientist Jack Cover as a non-lethal alternative to firearms. Today, they're standard equipment for law enforcement and have helped shape modern policing by offering a standoff method of subduing suspects. I found these small metal tools attached to my great-grandfather's World War I dog tags. The one on the right has the number 4 on the back, and both have small square notches at the end. Does anyone know what they were used for? What you found are antique pocket watch winding keys, small tools used in the 18th and 19th centuries to wind the mainspring of early pocket watches. Before modern stem wind mechanisms became standard, watches required a separate key like these to function. The square notches at the bottom of each key fit over a matching square arbor inside the watch. When turned, the key would tighten the spring that powered the movement. I saw this large device mounted on a trailer being towed by a white van. It looks like some kind of telescope or camera system on a rotating turret. There were no visible company names or markings, and while there's road construction in the area, this seems far more advanced than typical surveying equipment. The unit was spinning freely while the vehicle was moving. Does anyone know what this is? This is a mobile tracking system designed to detect and follow airborne objects like drones, aircraft, or other moving targets. It combines high-zoom video cameras, thermal imaging, and sometimes laser rangefinders, all mounted on a motorized turret that can rotate 360 degrees. This type of system is commonly used in military and security operations, especially as part of counter-drone defense setups. The unit automatically locks onto a moving object and keeps it centered in view day or night, regardless of speed or altitude. Systems like this gained widespread attention after the 2018 incident at Gatwick Airport in the United Kingdom. During the busy holiday season, unidentified drones were spotted over the airport's runways, leading to a full shutdown of operations. Around 1,000 flights were canceled or diverted, and over 140,000 passengers were affected just days before Christmas. The incident revealed how vulnerable major airports were to even small consumer-grade drones. It became a turning point in drone regulation policy, prompting airports around the world to invest in counter-UAV systems like this one to protect their airspace. I saw a street musician playing this unusual instrument, and I have never seen anything like it before. It looks tall and narrow with multiple vertical pipes or tubes, and he was holding it upright while playing. I could not tell if this is a traditional instrument or something he built himself because it looks a little homemade. The sound was beautiful and reminded me of a mix between an organ and a flute. Does anyone know what it is? What you saw is a sheng, a Chinese mouth organ, and it is one of the oldest reed instruments still played today. It is built around a wind chamber at the base and a cluster of upright bamboo pipes, each containing a small metal-free reed. The player blows into a mouthpiece, and the instrument sends air up into all the pipes at the same time. A pipe only sounds when the player covers its finger hole, which forces air across the reed and makes it vibrate. When more than one hole is covered, more than one pipe sounds at once, so the sheng can play chords and harmony, not just a single melody line. This unique feature is what gives the instrument its organ-like sound. The Sheng goes back more than 3,000 years, and it appears very early in Chinese history, including ancient inscriptions and classical poetry. Over time, its design was refined, and by the Tang Dynasty, a form with 17 pipes became a standard that also influenced neighboring countries, including the Japanese Shou and the Korean Sangkwang. The Sheng also had a surprising impact far beyond East Asia. When European musicians and scholars encountered it in the 1700s, they became fascinated by the free reed principle, and that idea helped spark the development of Western free reed instruments in the 19th century, including the harmonica, the accordion, and reed organs. I found this strange round object on the ground while hiking. It was very light and fragile, with a smooth surface covered in small bumps, and on one side there was a small heart-shaped hole. It felt thin and brittle, almost like a dried shell. I kept it in my jacket pocket to take home and research it, but it caved in. So I cracked it open and saw that the inside was filled with fine fiber strands, like cotton. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is an oak apple gall, a round growth formed on oak trees by a tiny gall wasp. It is a plant structure that forms after a female wasp deposits an egg into the tissue of an oak leaf or bud. The tree responds to chemical signals released by the developing larva and produces a spherical gall around it. Inside this structure is a fibrous, spongy interior that serves as both protection and nourishment for the growing insect. When the wasp reaches maturity, it chews its way out through a small exit hole, leaving the dried gall behind. Oak galls have been documented since ancient times and were once surrounded by superstition before science explained their true origin in the 17th century. They are extremely rich in tannins and played an important historical role in the production of iron gall ink, which was widely used for writing official documents for centuries. They were also used in leather tanning, textile dyeing, and traditional medicine. We found this ornate glass object at Goodwill, and none of us can figure out what it was originally used for. It comes in two matching halves that fit together like a case or holder. There are small openings on the sides that look like a rod could pass through them. Does anyone know what it is? This is a Victorian-era stamp moistener. It was designed to wet the adhesive gum on postage stamps and envelope flaps without having to lick them. The glass base served as a small water reservoir, and a roller or absorbent cylinder, which is now missing, originally rested across the side openings. That roller would partially sit in the water and rotate as a stamp was passed over it, transferring just enough moisture to activate the glue. Stamp moisteners became popular soon after adhesive postage stamps were introduced in the 1840s. As letter writing increased, so did complaints about the unpleasant taste and questionable hygiene of licking stamps. By the 1880s and 1890s, inventors were patenting increasingly refined versions of these devices, many featuring rollers, sponge pads, or enclosed reservoirs designed to control the amount of moisture applied. I found this strange plastic object, and I have no idea what it is. It has a round white center with three curved green pieces attached. The green portions curve inward and tuck underneath the white part, almost as if they are meant to grab or hold something. This is a pom-pom maker, a simple plastic craft tool used to make yarn pom-poms by hand. The round white center and the three curved green arms form a hinged frame. The green sections swing inward and lock under the white base, so yarn can be wrapped tightly around them. Once the arms are fully wrapped, the yarn is cut along the outer edge and then tied securely through the center. When the arms are opened, the loops release into a dense, fluffy ball. Specialized pom-pom makers began appearing in the late 1950s and early 1960s, when home yarn crafts were extremely popular in the United States. One of the earliest documented versions was patented in 1961 and described a plastic ring system designed specifically for forming pom-poms quickly and consistently. Over time, the design evolved into hinged arm models like this one, which made wrapping, tying, and trimming much easier than using cardboard circles. I regularly observe gray seals in the United Kingdom, but I've never seen a mark like this one before. Gray seals aren't hunted much around here, so what would be the purpose of a mark like this? This is a brand mark, a permanent identification symbol applied to a seal's skin by scientists. These marks allow researchers to study seal migration over long periods without needing to recapture the animal. The very first gray seal pup tagged in the United Kingdom, back in 1951, provided a surprising result. It swam from England to Norway, proving for the first time that these animals travel internationally. That single discovery sparked decades of collaborative research and demonstrated how a simple tag could reveal complex migration patterns. Today, tagging, photo identification, and satellite tracking are often used alongside branding. Gray seals, in particular, have unique spot patterns on their coats, which researchers now use like fingerprints to identify individuals through photographs. I found this hand crank device mounted on the wall of an old house. It has a metal top, a rotating handle, and markings for coarse and fine settings. Could this have been a coffee grinder, or was it used for something else? This is a mid-century wall-mounted manual ice crusher, a popular kitchen appliance from the 1940s through the 1960s, used to crush ice cubes for cocktails, salads, and chilled dishes. These devices were a staple of post-war home entertaining, especially in American households. Turning the hand crank engages a set of internal blades that grind the ice into coarse or fine pieces, which then fall into a detachable container or directly into a glass placed below. I found this small, round device underwater while metal detecting. It was buried about 6 inches deep in roughly 3 feet of water, and even though it must have been there for a while, it is still in great condition. The front has a logo on it, and the back is mostly blank, except for several tiny multicolor LED lights. The lights keep blinking in a random pattern, and it even started beeping on its own. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a Misfit Shine, a coin-sized, wearable activity tracker introduced around 2013 by the company Misfit Wearables. It was designed as a modern fitness and sleep monitor that quietly tracks your daily movement and rest. Instead of a screen, it uses a ring of tiny LED lights that glow when you double-tap the surface. Those lights show your progress toward a daily activity goal and can even indicate the time in a subtle pattern. The device runs on a replaceable coin battery that lasts several months. Its fully sealed construction also makes it waterproof, which explains why it was still working even after spending a long time underwater. My brother found this metal cap in the woods here in Slovenia. It looks like a bottle cap with threads on the inside, and it is made from a lightweight, non-magnetic metal that seems like aluminum. On the top, it has the words "Remove before firing" stamped into it, along with an arrow pointing counterclockwise. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a fuse safety cap, a threaded metal cover that screws onto the fuse of a mortar round or similar munition. This cap protected the fuse during storage, transport, and handling, and it had to be unscrewed just before the round was fired. The arrow indicates the direction to turn it. Once removed, the fuse underneath could function as intended when the projectile was launched and struck its target. These caps were most commonly used on mortar bombs during the Second World War, especially in British and Commonwealth service. My friend has this old wooden device that belonged to his grandfather, and we are trying to figure out what it was used for. It folds down and collapses into its base, and it has 3 glass lenses on the front, all of which magnify. The large circular lens is at the top, and there are 2 smaller lenses below it. My friend thinks it might have something to do with photography, but we are not sure. What you have is an antique tabletop stereographoscope, a late 19th century viewer that combines a stereoscope and a magnifying graphoscope in a single device. It was designed for viewing photographic prints and stereoscopic image cards. The large round lens at the top serves as a magnifier for single photographs, allowing cabinet cards, postcards, or small prints to be enlarged for detailed viewing. The 2 smaller lenses below form the stereoscope portion. When a stereo card with 2 nearly identical images is placed in the holder, each eye sees a slightly different image through those twin lenses, and the brain merges them into a single 3-dimensional scene. These viewers became popular in the mid to late 19th century, shortly after the invention of stereoscopic photography. The stereoscope concept dates back to 1838, when Sir Charles Wheatstone demonstrated how 2 images viewed separately by each eye could create the illusion of depth. Later improvements by Sir David Brewster made the design more portable and practical. By the 1850s and 1860s, stereoscopes had become a widespread form of home entertainment in Britain, France, and the United States. I found this strange metal tube in my grandma's garage. The side is stamped gun pen, and there is also a warning about containing freon. But when I look inside, there is nothing that resembles any kind of firearm mechanism. It has a small side button and a keyhole-shaped opening in the body. Does anyone know what it is? What you have is a vintage tear gas gun pen, a pen-shaped single-shot launcher that was marketed in the early to mid-20th century as a compact personal defense device. Inside the tubular body is a spring-loaded striker mechanism. The long external slot and small side stud are used to cock the internal spring. When released, the striker strikes the primer of a small cartridge seated in the barrel, discharging either a tear gas charge or, in later variants, a small signaling flare. Devices of this type began appearing in the late 1920s and early 1930s, during a period when tear gas moved from military and police experimentation into the commercial self-defense market. Multiple patents from around 1928 through 1933 describe fountain pen-style gas pistols with tubular bodies, cocking studs running in longitudinal slots, and internal safety features intended to reduce accidental discharge or misuse with standard ammunition. In the 1970s, regulatory scrutiny increased, and United States federal authorities classified many pen-style launchers as firearms if they could be readily converted to expel a projectile. That shift, along with the growing popularity of aerosol pepper spray, largely brought an end to the commercial market for tear gas gun pens. I found this unusual instrument in my late grandfather's house, and he used to be a ship captain, so I assume it may have something to do with navigation. It appears to be Russian, and inside the wooden case there are several optical attachments that look like binocular pieces that can be mounted onto the main device. When I look through one of them, the image appears upside down. Does anyone know what it is? What you have is a traditional marine sextant, a precision optical instrument used at sea to measure the angle between a celestial body and the horizon, or between two visible objects. Those angle measurements allow a navigator to calculate a ship's position using exact time, nautical tables, and celestial coordinates. The detachable optical tubes are interchangeable telescopes designed for different viewing conditions. Some provide an upright image, which makes it easier to identify coastal landmarks or align clearly with the horizon. Others use a simpler optical system that produces an inverted image but allows more light to pass through. That brighter view becomes especially useful when observing faint stars or celestial bodies during twilight or nighttime navigation. The sextant evolved from the earlier octant in the early 18th century, when John Hadley and Thomas Godfrey independently developed reflecting instruments around 1730. By the mid-18th century, sextants had become essential tools for ocean navigation, particularly after the publication of the Nautical Almanac, which enabled mariners to convert measured angles into precise longitude and latitude. Throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, sextants remained standard equipment aboard naval and merchant vessels worldwide. I found this old metal device mounted on the brick wall outside my workplace, and I have no idea what it is. It has two heavy cast housings with keyholes on the front. Does anyone know what it is? This is an early 20th century automatic awning control mechanism, essentially a dual self-locking awning winch designed to raise and lower large canvas storefront awnings. It was manufactured by Metzger Brothers of Rutland, Vermont, and it is marked with the patent date June 25, 1912. A removable hand crank would be inserted into the square opening and turned to roll the awning up or let it down. Inside each cast metal housing is a geared drive connected to the awning's roller tube, and the internal locking system holds the awning securely in position as soon as the crank is removed. That allowed a shopkeeper to stop the awning at any height without it slipping or shifting in the wind, and the dual arrangement kept a wide awning level and evenly supported on both sides. I found this strange metal pin lying loose in my Jeep's engine bay, and I have no idea where it came from. It has a plastic split washer or spacer at the top, and the metal shaft is slightly bent. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a brake pad retaining pin. It is a small metal pin used in disc brake assemblies to secure the brake pads inside the caliper so they stay properly aligned with the rotor. The pin slides through holes in the brake pads, and in many designs, it also holds a spring clip that maintains tension on the pads and keeps them from rattling or shifting out of place. I'm trying to help a friend figure out what this metal object is. It has a pointed blade-like piece that moves and locks into place, and the handle has a decorative shape. It feels solid and heavy. We thought it might be some kind of letter opener, but we're not sure. What you're looking at is an antique Klapladen halter, known in English as a shutter holder or shutter dog. It is a simple mechanical device designed to hold an exterior window shutter in the open position. The pointed metal arm pivots outward and locks into place, catching the edge of the shutter and keeping it securely against the wall so it does not swing in the wind. In many European regions, especially in Germany and France, shutter holders were often cast with human or animal motifs as part of traditional architectural design. Shutter holders became common throughout Europe and the United States in the 18th and 19th centuries. By the mid-19th century, manufacturers were patenting improved shutter fasteners and self-locking hinge systems to make shutters easier and safer to secure. I saw this wooden object hanging inside a Cracker Barrel restaurant, and I could not figure out what it was. It looks almost like a small wooden beach chair or some kind of folding frame, but it is suspended from the ceiling as decoration. Does anyone know what it is? This is a flax brake, a traditional wooden tool used to process flax or hemp into usable fiber. The tool works by placing a small bundle of dried stalks across the lower wooden slats and repeatedly bringing the hinged upper section down on top. The motion does not cut the plant like scissors. Instead, it crushes and flexes the stalks just enough to shatter the woody interior, often called shivs or boon, while keeping the long fibers as intact as possible. After this breaking stage, the fibers still require further cleaning with tools such as a scutching knife or comb, because breaking loosens the woody material but does not fully remove all debris. Flax brakes were common household tools in colonial America and throughout Europe during the 18th and 19th centuries. Probate records from the 18th century list flax brakes alongside spinning wheels as the standard household equipment. By the mid-19th century, inventors in the United States began patenting mechanized flax and hemp brakes to reduce labor and increase fiber yield. I saw this group of tall wooden poles on the edge of a stadium parking lot while leaving a Bills game. There are school sports fields nearby. Does anyone know what it is? What you're looking at is a utility pole training yard, sometimes called a lineman training field. These poles are used to teach future line workers how to safely climb, install hardware, string lines, and perform rescues. Apprentices learn to use climbing spikes, safety belts, harnesses, and other protective equipment in a controlled environment before ever working on live electrical lines. The cross arms, insulators, and other attachments at the top simulate real-world conditions, allowing trainees to build muscle memory and confidence while working at height. Formal lineman training programs began developing in the early 20th century as electric and telephone networks expanded rapidly across the United States. Line work was extremely dangerous in the early days, and the industry eventually recognized that structured training dramatically reduced injuries and fatalities. By the mid-20th century, dedicated training yards like this became standard for utilities and trade schools. I bought this as part of a war memorabilia eBay lot about a year ago, and I'm still trying to figure out what it is. It's about 3 inches tall, made of brass, and has a threaded base. There's a round opening on the front where you can see a small metal component inside. The top cap screws off and reveals a red insert underneath. Does anyone know what it is? What you have is an inert demonstration model of a point-detonating artillery fuse. In military terminology, a fuse is the self-contained triggering mechanism that screws into the nose of a shell and causes it to detonate on impact. This model was used to teach students or technicians how the mechanism works without any explosive material inside. The red tip striker represents the impact element that would drive a firing pin into a detonator in a live version. Throughout the 20th century, point detonating mechanisms remained standard in artillery and mortar ammunition, even as more advanced proximity and electronic fuses were introduced. I found this rock in western Illinois and noticed several small star-shaped fossils embedded in it, along with more common shell fragments. Does anyone know what it is? What you have is a fossilized crinoid stem segment, the preserved stalk of an ancient marine animal related to starfish and sea urchins, commonly called a sea lily. In life, the animal's body, known as the crown, sat on top of a long column made of stacked disc-shaped segments. When you look at one of these segments in cross-section, you sometimes see a 5-pointed star pattern. That star shape reflects the crinoid's five-fold symmetry, a defining feature of echinoderms. During the Mississippian sub-period, roughly 350 million years ago, much of the Midwest was covered by warm, shallow seas. Crinoids flourished there in enormous numbers, forming dense underwater communities. When they died, their stems broke apart and accumulated on the seafloor. Over time, those remains became compacted into limestone, and in some areas the rock is composed largely of crinoid fragments. My mom found this small wooden device in a shed, and we are trying to figure out what it is. It has a round dial with numbers increasing on both sides from 0, but there are no units marked anywhere. The pointer rests at 0 in the center, and there are a few small knobs on top. Does anyone know what it is? This is a galvanometer, a sensitive analog instrument used to detect and indicate small electric currents. The center 0 scale is the key clue. When current flows through the instrument's coil, it creates a magnetic force that makes the needle swing to the left or right, depending on the direction of the current. With no current, the pointer returns to the 0 mark. Galvanometers trace back to the early 19th century, after scientists discovered that electric current could deflect a magnetic needle. This style of galvanometer was widely used during the telegraph era and the early days of telephone networks as a field tester for line workers. It helped confirm whether a line was live, whether current was flowing in the expected direction, and whether a circuit was open. I found this small object that looks like a little scuba tank, but I've been using it as a toothpick holder. It has a watertight seal, so I'm guessing it's somehow related to diving. It's also great for stabbing snacks and eating without getting crumbs on my hands. Does anyone know what it's actually used for? What you have is a mini scuba tank O-ring kit keychain that divers carry as part of a save-a-dive kit. The little tank unscrews at the base, and inside it holds spare O-rings along with a small brass pick built into the cap. Those O-rings are the tiny rubber seals used on scuba valves and hose connections, and if one gets nicked or slips out, it can cause an air leak that can end a dive before it even starts. The brass pick is used to hook the damaged O-ring out of its groove without gouging the metal, and then a fresh one can be dropped into place. I noticed this yellow box mounted on the side of an old limestone building in Bloomington, Indiana, that dates back to the 1880s. It is positioned above the first floor, too high to reach from the sidewalk. The box appears to have hinges and a front panel, almost like a small cabinet attached to the exterior wall. We cannot figure out what it would have been used for, especially since it is not easily accessible from outside. What you're looking at is an antique vault alarm box, essentially an early exterior burglar alarm mounted on a bank building. These metal boxes housed a large mechanical or electric bell that would sound if the vault or building was disturbed. When triggered, the alarm rang loudly through the neighborhood, alerting police, nearby businesses, and anyone within earshot. Vault alarm systems began appearing in the mid-19th century, not long after the first electric burglar alarm was patented in 1853 by Augustus Russell Pope. By the late 1800s and early 1900s, specialized companies were installing increasingly sophisticated alarm systems in banks across the United States. These systems relied on closed electrical circuits connected to vault doors, windows, and interior switches. If a door was forced or wiring was cut, the circuit would change state and activate the exterior bell box. I found this small metal object with a circular finger loop on one end. It's only a few inches long and appears to be solid metal. Does anyone know what it is? This is a small brass loop that attaches to the third valve tuning slide on a trumpet or cornet. A player puts the ring finger of the left hand through this loop to grip the instrument and to move the third valve slide while playing. That slide movement helps correct intonation on certain valve combinations that run sharp. By pulling the slide out slightly on those notes, the player lengthens the tubing and brings the pitch down into tune, then returns the slide for the next notes. This feature goes back to the early days of valved brass instruments in the 19th century, when players and makers realized that some fingerings needed quick slide adjustment to stay in tune. In the last video, I asked you to guess what this unusual plastic object might be used for. Everyone had great guesses, and many of you got it right. This item is a bedsheet tucking tool. It is used to push sheets under a mattress, making it easier to tuck them in tightly. Thank you to everyone who participated and shared your guesses. A special shout out to Pletch73 for being the first to correctly identify it. All right, it's time for another mystery item. Take a look at this unusual object. What do you think it might be used for? Leave your guesses in the comments, and I'll reveal the answer in the next video. I'd like to give a special thank you to all my channel members. Your support truly helps this channel grow. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Your support motivates me to create more videos. See you next time.